If you're dealing with smaller deals, anything, even in some residential situations, right? Like a 2-family, 4-family, 5 units, 10 units, smaller stuff where you have like a single tenant, right? Like a lot of like the easier tiny stuff where you're looking at maybe 1 million or less, maybe even 2 million or less. For an investor to make an offer, they probably don't need to see financials, right? Like they don't need to see exact numbers. It's pretty common for a lot of the smaller stuff. We're like, hey, if you could just tell me what these 3 units or 4 units are renting for, we're good. But when you get into 5, 10, $20 million deals, like again, we're working on a deal right now. Seller wants $55 million, and they won't give us any financials. If you want me to write you a check for $55 million, I need to see something, right? Or again, I tell them to be very direct. So like my 2 cents is the following. If a seller for these types of large deals is not willing to give you financials, you need to buckle up and be very direct with them. And I say the following thing, like, listen, John, if you don't want to sell the property, that's totally fine. But if you want me to bring you an offer from a real legitimate guy who's going to close, I need to see some financials, right? Because clearly someone's not going to cut you a check for 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, $55 million without seeing some type of proof that the numbers actually make sense so they can run those numbers with their lender. And no one is going to just, quote, believe your words for a deal that size. If you want to sell it, I need to see some financials. If you don't want to sell, it's totally fine. But it's one or the other. What would you like to do? And you need to be able to play a little bit of hardball, because if they're not going to give you financials, you're not going to get the deal sold, and I think you'd be wasting your time. Now, that's the main point I want to make. Now, there is a second side of this, which is I make the offer on the deal to quote unquote show them proof. Hey, here's the offer. I need to now see some financials. I will do that sometimes, where I'll say, hey, just put an offer in my name at X price, and let's see if the guy will give me financials. Right? So again, you nailed this guy down on a price. Give me an example. You nailed him down. If you have a specific guy in mind, let's see if we can work this out.
Yeah, so I've got a guy in Mount Pleasant. It's an 8-unit. It's valued at about 2.8, and he has agreed to sell it for 2.2. But that's based off of pro forma numbers. So my guys are wanting to see, what he's actually getting. And sometimes with some of these situations, it's challenging. Like this guy's like a plumber. He bought it a really long time ago, Class A location.
Yep.
And he's been taking cash under the table, is what my gut's telling me.
Okay. Sounds pretty. So I'd recommend that you can do one of a couple things. Number one, you could call the guy up, maybe meet him face to face, and try to review some of the numbers. And say, hey, what is unit 1 getting? What is unit 2 getting? And build your own rent roll. That's one option, right? Like where you sit down with the guy, whether virtually over the phone or face to face, and you actually build out your own rent roll. Or 2, you say, listen, I have an offer right now, letter of intent written up for $2 million, 1.9, something like, again, this guy wants 2.2, and say, hey, I have an offer right now for this. He won't, I'm pretty sure I can get the guy to come up a little bit, but I need to see some type of financials. What would you like to do? And you keep trying to squeeze up the quote offer and also trying to, get this person to give you as much information as possible. And look, for the people that are truly not investors, right? Like again, the guy who wants $55 million is a very seasoned guy. It's for his entire portfolio. Clearly that guy has a rent roll, right? Clearly. Okay. It's almost 200 units. I mean, like in California. So clearly they have something. However, if you're dealing with like Bob the plumber, who maybe doesn't have a rent roll, right? Because he probably doesn't even know what that means, possibly. If this is his only property, you might have to build it.
That makes sense.
And then again, I use like all those pieces together, can put it, get you close enough to a deal to happen. But also like, look, it's also reading between the lines of, if they don't give you financials and they're not willing to kind of budge or move or anything like that on a lot more complicated deals, like if it was like a 80,000 square foot industrial building and he's not, and it's got 15 tenants in it and they're all different leases, different lease start dates, different end dates, different types of terms. Some are triple net, some are not. It's really fucking hard for me to come up with an offer. Kind of playing it around depending on the situation.
Perfect. Makes sense.
Yeah, and keep in mind, guys, like this is very common. Right? It's very common that people don't give you the information, don't give you financials, don't give you rent rolls, don't give you leases. But if you want to move a deal, 90+% of the time, you're going to need something to present to an investor so they can run their numbers. Like most investors are not like me, right? Like where I'll put something in writing because I don't care, right? Like, what are they going to say? Yes. And then all of a sudden we go into, an LOI position where they've executed it, and we go to attorneys, and then they have to provide me the financials anyways. Like, I don't really care, or they say no to it. It's not a big deal to me. However, other investors like to be a lot more concrete. Just for me, I'm in a different position. So, for most investors, even very seasoned investors, you'll notice that they want to get as much information as possible before they just throw something on paper, because a lot of them are, my word is my bond. If I say that I'm going to pay X price, I'm going to close at X price. I've seen it 100 times. So just keep in mind that, like, the giving you the highest likelihood to selling a property is getting all financials. Like, I just had somebody send me a deal. They just sent me a deal earlier this week on Monday. Finally had some time to review it yesterday, and I was going through it, and it's a shopping center deal. Very interesting shopping center deal. And in this shopping center deal, they're open to doing seller financing. The numbers are actually pretty interesting. It's a deal in Florida. So I'm reviewing it, and the cap rate's not wonderful. And then I noticed that they did not attach any leases, and they didn't even state that any of they just wrote the gross rent number, okay, at the bottom of the email. They just said, hey, gross rents are $250,000 or something like that. And when someone sends me an email like that, now they told me the price. They told me the terms the seller would accept. Okay, this is another broker who brought me the deal. Price was, they told me. They gave me the square footage. They gave me, the terms of the seller financing, which makes a lot of sense. And looking at it, the numbers overall are interesting enough for me to want to know more, but I couldn't even say yay or nay to me being able to pay the price that the seller wants, or the terms that the seller wants, because I don't even know the leases. Because without the leases, I'm making up things. Like, they're saying it's $250 gross, and like the debt payments that the seller agreed to, I'm rounding, okay, for this situation. Let's say income is $250 a year. Seller's willing to take $130 a year in debt payments. Okay. So it's like, okay, I have $120,000 in quote spread. But here's the thing. If it's all gross rent, okay, $250 minus $130, that is probably about what the expenses are for a Florida shopping center of this size, right? So there's no cash flow. And this guy's like, oh, well, the cash flow is 20-something% day one. I'm like, you're completely incorrect, right? Like, there's probably no cash flow, actually, even with only, in this situation, the seller wants like 20% down. So the terms in theory sound lucrative, right? Which is why I found it fairly, and the price per square foot of the shopping center was also pretty good for the market. So those two things caught my attention. But then you're like, this is why I ignore a lot of people's estimates of cash on cash, estimates of internal rates of return, estimates on any type of quote return. I'd rather you just say, hey, this is the gross income, right? And let me do the calculations. Here's the leases. Here's last year's rent roll, or the up-to-date rent roll. Here's last year's P&L. Here's the year-to-date P&L, right? Is it going up? Is it going down? Like, what direction are we going in? Let me do the calculation, and I can make my own offer. But this is also why when you're trying to sell deals, the more information you can provide a buyer, okay, an investor like myself, the easier it is for me to come to some type of conclusion of a price to make an offer at. Because if you give me no information, it's like a dating thing. Like, imagine you have a friend of yours who's single and you're trying to set them up. You're like, oh, I have the perfect person for you. And they're like, okay, tell me about her or him or whatever. And you're like, I have no information. You're like, okay, I don't know what to say, right? Like, I'm kind of scared, actually, right? Is how I would respond. Right. So it's like, the more information you give, the easier it is to get an answer that you're probably looking for. Same thing for, for these types of commercial deals. If you don't have a P&L, you don't have a rent roll, you don't have leases, okay, for anything besides multifamily, you're not going to need leases. But if you don't have any of that information, what do you think the buyer is going to request from you? Probably all that information. So I think that it's best for everyone to realize, like, hey, if you want more, a higher likelihood, let's say it that way. If you want a higher likelihood that these individuals, these buyers, are willing to make offers for you at any price, and if you don't have enough information to get them to that point, the odds of them writing something up is near zero. Right? I don't care how good the deal is. Now, obviously, it's different for me. Like, if you send me a deal in New Jersey where I can look up a price per unit or a price per square foot in most instances, I know the deal is probably going to pencil pretty well, even if I'm buying it at a day one 5 cap. That's my rant. Rant is over. Gabriel says, if you want to come off mute, let's talk about it.
A super specific question because obviously cap rates and everything that's moving and interest costs going up. So like, is there anything that you're doing in underwriting? Because I spent a few hours yesterday underwriting deals and I could not find one deal that made sense. Are very far from the spread right now.
I think that a couple things come to mind. Number one, it's realizing that in these types of markets, you're going to have to generate more leads to get better quality deals, right? Like there's going to be less deals are going to make sense in a market like this. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit shortly about the conversation I had with my buddy. But we talked about that. We're like, this economy in a lot of ways has some great positives. And there's also some pretty tough challenges that we're experiencing, especially as brokers, which is that disparity, the delta between what sellers want and what buyers are willing to pay. If you're only generating 5 or 10 leads a month, you're hoping, like, you would need such a high percentage of every conversation to work out, which is just an unreasonable ask. Right now, one of the biggest things our team is pushing towards is trying to 2 to 3x the amount of leads we're generating. How do we get to 2 to 3x the amount of leads we're generating? Because I know that the percentage of quality deals is so low right now. I need to be more active in generating opportunities because I know that only so many are going to make sense right now. Now, what the beautiful thing is, though, is if you go from generating, let's say, how many leads a month are you generating right now? Estimated, whatever, you don't have to.
10 to 20.
10 to 20. Okay. Let's just use 20 as an example. If you're generating 20 leads a month, I'm going to guess that something around one-ish deal a month is even remotely interesting, just based on those numbers and what I've seen. Now, look, one deal a month, right, is now then 12 deals a year that could be relatively interesting. You only need to quote close on 2 of them and you make 200 grand a year, right? I mean, like obviously that's, depending on your price range and the deals and whatever, but so it's not horrible. But again, to go from, call it a few hundred grand a year, 100, 200K a year to 100 a month, right? You need to, like, again, we need to be thinking in terms of 10x the amount of numbers, right? Like, so generating 200 leads a month, or what my team does is, typically between 600 and 1,000 leads a month. When you're in that range, I know that, okay, I'm probably going to have something like 20 to 30 leads a month that are actually of high quality, right? That I know that I can probably have a decent chance of selling this month. But I also know the sexy part about it, what I get excited about, is that when the market shifts, when it happens, because it will happen eventually, all of these people that I've generated over here in this huge bucket are going to be, another 2 to 10% are going to turn into deals if interest rates just drop a point. And then if interest rates drop another, I'm not saying they're going to, but if interest rates drop another point, it's another 2 to 10%. So all of a sudden this huge pool of stuff out, it pops out. So like that's why, for people who are only generating 10 or 20 leads a month, you're going to feel like it's really difficult to make deals happen. But it's because, your pool of opportunity is tiny, right? So keep in mind, especially of the 10 to 20 leads a month that you're generating, how many offers are you actually submitting verbally to those individuals? Are you doing 100% of them?
Probably like 10% of them are actually sending out offers.
Yeah, so I would say you need to be at 100%. Okay, 100 to get a better conversion rate of what you've generated so far. 100% of every opportunity that you generate, you must submit an offer on. Okay, a verbal offer, period, on every single deal you get. What that's going to do is that's going to sift out the crap from people who might be open. And then you're going to get information back from these people, okay? And that's going to, be the ones that you spend a little bit more time on, right? When they counter you at a reasonable number, or you actually have enough information, financials, leases, yada, yada, to underwrite the deals and see how close you want to be. Now, instead of underwriting these deals to some crazy extent and then thinking they don't make any sense, put them in front of a couple buyers first, because your underwriting versus somebody else's underwriting can be completely different. And there's been plenty of deals where I tell my team, I'm like, hey, like I don't think this deal makes any sense. And then, 3 weeks later, we have 2 offers on. Doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's a little high, but we call up a guy in that market who happens to be willing to overpay for X type of product. There's still an opportunity there. So that's why, part of the science of the way I look at these deals is saying, this deal does, properties don't, by the way, in this market don't have to be a steal to sell. I want to be very clear. They don't have to be a steal, but they do have to make some kind of sense, which could be, hey, and again, just talking to, you're in Florida, so I'll give you an example. If you have a shopping center right now, which you deal with retail and industrial, or what, right? Okay. So if you're taking a retail shopping center or an industrial property right now, which I obviously know that market's kind of nuts right now, we're finding deals where you're able to buy it at a day 1.7 cap, which isn't terrible, right? I mean, it's not a steal by any means, right? You're still paying $250 a foot, but you're buying it at a day 1.7 cap, and those exist. And I'm seeing even north of sevens. And again, you're paying a decent price per square foot, but everyone is. And if you underwrite it, and you're maybe a little bit more conservative or a little bit less conservative, it swings a deal possibly enough to make a deal happen. So just keep in mind, I only start really underwriting a property once I put it to 3 or 4 or 5 buyers and they made me offers. That's when I start underwriting a deal to an extent where I'm like, I might buy this thing. It's generate a lead, make a starter offer verbally, get all the information I possibly can to now justify their counter, right, based on my offer. Then I take all that information, I put into a Google Drive, an email or something like that, and instead of, quote, underwriting it in full, I'd rather bring it to 3 or 5 or 10 VIP buyers for that specific asset, get their offers first, gauge the deal and likelihood of sale based on that feedback, and then take those offers, and then I can justify and say, hey, the seller wants $2 million. Every one of these offers I pitched out at 2.5. They all came back at 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, whatever. I might want to buy this deal at $2 million, or I could just broker it out. Again, if you have a lot of good interest, you could just broker the deal. Again, depending on the situation. Or roles reverse. Seller wants $2 million. All my offers are 1.2, 1.4, 1.5 to 1.3. They're all very low. Now I need to go back to seller and try to see if there's a way to bridge the gap or not. What you're doing is generating an opportunity, getting some information from them, underwriting the deal, and saying it's not a deal or not. Instead, flip it completely and ignore your ability of underwriting. You don't need to underwrite the deal, right? Now you need to, kind of get an understanding if this guy is out of his absolute mind and he's asking for $20 million for a 5,000 square foot shopping center. You would make yourself look very stupid if you brought that to an investor. But you don't need to be like, oh, well, this deal might only be worth $5 million, but the seller wants 6. He's stupid. You know what I mean? He's not interested in selling. You know what I mean? I'd rather you just take the deal at 6, 6.25, bring it to a guy and pitch it to them at 6.25, 6.5, whatever covers your comp. Get some feedback from them, and even if you pitch it to 3 or 4 or 5 buyers, and they all say on this situation, the seller wants, let's say, $6 million net, you pitch it for 6.5, they all come back to you at $5 million, 5.25, 5.5. You then go back to the seller with those offers. There's nothing for you to underwrite yet. The underwriting piece comes in handy when you just need to for me, it's more so of quickly understanding, are we even in a realm of possibility in this situation? Imagine, for a 20,000 square foot shopping center, the guy wants 600 a foot out of his goddamn mind. But if he says he wants 250 a foot, it's just understanding and, quick numbers and going okay, 250 a foot's market. Okay, great. I don't need to put it into a spreadsheet and know if it's an unbelievable deal yet. That's the last thing I'll do I'll give you an example. This is actually something I was going to hold for part of the training, but I think it's good here. There was a warehouse deal that I got, okay? I talked about it on my story a little bit today. There was a warehouse deal that we got, small warehouse, 10,000 feet. They were like, hey, we want 1.5. I said, listen, offer them $1 million. Let's see what they say. Offer them $1 million. They said, listen, we won't do $1 million, but we need a little, but we're interested in selling. We need to do at least a little bit more. I said, okay, fine, 1.1. They basically took my offer at 1.1. And I said, okay, pitch it out to a few buyers and see what we can do. I was like, I actually also think this is a steal of a deal, but let's just see what kind of offers we get. We get one guy who wants to offer $1.2 million, 60-day closing, nothing too crazy, but we had it at $1.1 million. We could sell it for $1.2 million. It's not enough of a delta to wholesale it. It's only $100,000 on 1.2. So we said, we'll make 7% commission, call it a freaking day. We don't want to be too greedy. We want to be able to close. Okay. Long story short, they go, okay, fine. We're going to move forward with the deal. We pitched it out a little bit more, and I said, hey, pitch it out at 1 point instead of 1.2. I said, let's go, because this guy gave us an offer in literally 2 hours of 1.2. Okay. I said, go to the market, go to a few more of our guys and say, and tell them all 1.35 closing 30 days has to be cash. Because I know this deal, I know this market. I think this is actually an interesting opportunity. I didn't underwrite it yet. There's nothing to underwrite yet. Within 24 hours, we had 2 offers at 1.35 closing 30 days. So now what I'm realizing is like, and again, I didn't stick it in a spreadsheet. I didn't try to do all the fancy numbers yet, knowing if it's a great deal or not. All I was looking at was price per square foot in this market. It's a 10,000 square foot warehouse. We got it locked up for 110 a foot. I know it's an easily 130, 140 a foot market, no matter what. This thing will probably sell for 200 a foot in a year or two once they rent it out for a good price and they clean it up a little bit. So now it's 135. And I even said to one of the buyers, because they both offered 135, I said, listen, there's a lot of offers on this. If you need to come up a little bit and better your terms. He offered 1375. No contingencies, closing 30 days, cash. And a $100,000 deposit, by the way. Now we have a $275,000 spread between the 1.1 and the 1375 this guy offered. Now, of fucking course, we're wholesaling this deal. Of course we are, right? We're going to double close on it. We're probably going to clear 225 to 240, depending on closing costs and other things. But this is a perfect example of like, I didn't need to underwrite a fucking thing in a spreadsheet. It's just knowing the local market price per square foot, because the cap rate blows on a current income. So if you underwrote this like in a spreadsheet, you might look at it from the lens of this deal doesn't make any sense. It's a fucking, by the way, it's like a 4.5 cap, by the way. It's like a 4.5 cap at 1375. But nobody's buying this on a cap rate. The price per square foot is a steal in this market. So that's what I'm going off of, that basis. So that's why it's like more so when you're trying to sell a retail or industrial building, as an example, if it's an unbelievable price per square foot, cap rate doesn't mean a thing. With a multifamily deal, if it's a wonderful price per unit, cap rate doesn't mean a thing. I would buy a 5 cap right now if I could buy a deal at 50 cents on the dollar for a price per square foot, or I buy a 3 cap right now for 50 cents on the dollar price per square foot or price per unit. Don't be obsessed with cap rate today. Don't be obsessed with underwriting every single deal. It's important to understand underwriting to a decent extent, right? So that you can combat a buyer who's saying, oh, well, the cap rate's only, 6.5%, my blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, but we both know the lease comps are twice as much. It's rented for $10 a foot gross. It's 18 triple net, in this market. So he's like, oh, okay, well, because when you can speak that intelligently and say, hey, here's 6 comps of leasing that have just happened based off CoStar reports of 18 triple net, 19 triple net, 20 triple net in this market. It's $10 a foot gross. Who gives a if it's a 4 cap? When you could educate your client that way, they're going to be like, oh, wait a second. I can go for $10 gross to 18 triple net all day. That's why this deal, the shopping center deal that I was just talking about, makes a ton of sense long-term for somebody.